And this is the working hour. We're back in California again after a little trip over to Houston. It was great seeing some friends and seeing, people that we used to work with and stuff. Just to kind of talk a little bit about, catching up on our experiences and kind of what's been going on in our world. So that was really a good thing. Um, I think the other thing is, it just was kind of nice to get away, but I will tell you, it was hot as nobody's business. The whole time we were there, it did not break under 100 degrees, and it was humid. So it just, I walked off the plane and I thought, oh my God, it's like being on the surface of the sun kind of thing. Um, so today I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Um, one of the things I'll tell you right now is the one thing that's always constant is change. And today we're actually going to change it up from what originally I was going to speak about was more about, getting some help and getting some coaching when it comes to your job search. And we'll deal with that next week. Um, but I had an opportunity to talk to a really fantastic and wonderful person. And I'm saying that not because she's my wife. I'm saying that because it's honestly the God's honest truth. She is one of the most incredible people I've ever met. She's so bright, so smart. Um, you know, I've worked with her in our own business, and I've also worked with her in a corporate environment. And I will tell you this, she just is absolutely brilliant. So I'm actually going to bring her in. I want everyone to welcome Jean Ali Muhlbauer. Um, and we will go and we will get her on here now. Hey, Jean.
Hey Carl, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, thank you so much for taking time to come and do this today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Uh, we talked a little bit earlier about, I guess, a little bit about what we were going to speak about today.
Hmm.
And one of the things we said we wanted to talk about was we wanted to talk about self leadership. And why don't we start off a little bit and we kind of you both you and I have talked about this, how can you lead others if you can't lead yourself kind of thing. So why don't you tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing and a little bit well, tell me and the audience a little bit about the work that you're doing and how it relates to self-leadership.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. So my website is ginalee.com, and some of the work that I'm doing is helping leaders, whether they're in the corporate sector or they own their own business, and I'm helping them scale their careers or their business. And some of the ways we do that is through leadership, particularly self leadership, building high performing teams, and growing their projects or their company. And so, as you can tell from that introduction, self leadership is a pretty important aspect of the work that I do.
Okay. um, well, let's dig in a little
Mhm.
bit more about self-leadership and a little bit more about um, how you help individuals with self-leadership and kind of understanding kind of maybe a little bit of the principles and kind of understanding a little bit more about um, you know how someone might get started.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we do, and clearly it depends as to whether an individual, when they're starting, what's the starting point for an individual or a group that I work with. But some of the key tenets, I would say, are self-awareness. Um, that can include things like knowing your strengths, understanding your unique value proposition, knowing your personal values, and how that applies to your work, knowing where you're going. Um, and that can include things that having clear goals. One of the things that I know you and I talk about is that people very often know what they don't want, but it's a lot harder to know what you want, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things you know, even like in our travels last week when we were in Houston, some of the people we talked with, are people that we've known for years and stuff like that. It was very evident, uh, even some of the new people that we had met, as through a party and stuff like that. Everyone knew exactly what they didn't want,
Mhm.
but when you kind of pushed them a little bit, so what are you looking for? Uh, then all of a sudden you got the blank stares, or you got oh, I don't know exactly what that is.
Yeah, I think it's hard because of a couple of reasons. One is we don't really know what's possible. We're a little bit limited in some ways by the people that are around us and what's possible for them. So, like,
Mhm,
say, when we're in corporate, we're surrounded by people who are working in corporate, right? And so, if we want to start our own business, that seems pretty far fetched because we're not surrounded by people that work on their own business. And so, sometimes we have to change our environment a bit to understand our possibilities better. I mean, that's just one example, right? So
mhm.
that's why I think that could be a challenge sometimes to do that work on your own. Yeah.
No, I definitely get it, and I taught in this space a little bit when I worked in corporate.
Hmm.
And, one of the things that we did is we actually had, you know, people come in to actually facilitate the training. I couldn't do all the training and all the different things that I needed to do. It just was for the number of people we were doing it for, and the frequency and stuff. They just that wasn't possible. So we actually outsourced some of the things. And one of the things that we did was when it came to self leadership, we actually worked with Ken Blanchard and his team in bringing in people to actually do um, some of the training around self leadership. And it was honestly one of the most popular courses that I actually, put on for the company. But one of the things that honestly was one of those big aha moments, and I was really fortunate to meet one of the creators of the program. Um, But one of the things that really stuck with me was this principle of, um, having pre I guess the best way to put it is having, constraints that you put on yourself. Nobody puts those constraints on you, or preconceived notions on what things are, and I always felt that was really impactful. You wanna talk maybe a little bit about how we maybe dim our light a little bit, um, just because we think either we can't, or we shouldn't, or we might be insulting somebody, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Um, you know, one of the basic tenets that I work on too is leadership presence, and that's a big one, right? Even the idea of thinking of yourself as a leader is a stretch for some of us, right? We think we have to have a big team. We think we have to have XYZ, a specific title. And the reality is that all it takes to be a leader is to think of yourself as one and behave accordingly. And so um, I think the quickest way to take yourself out of the game is to not play at all, right? To tell yourself no before anybody else gets the chance to. And
Mhm,
um, I think I understand the why. I think you understand the why, right? It's a protection mechanism. It's easier to tell yourself no than maybe to get told no by somebody else. Um, but that creates a pretty small life, right? It's not the life that I think most of us want to live. Um, and sometimes it comes from past experience, from having a difficult boss or being let down in front of other people or humiliated. And sometimes we have to process that, right? In whichever way we process things, whether it's in therapy or with a coach or with some physical exercise or talking to a friend or however we want to kind of like go over those experiences so we can move forward. But it's certainly a common thing that I think, all do. So there's no shame around it. But certainly something, like you said, to be aware of so that we don't limit ourselves and we give ourselves the best opportunity for things.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. They actually start the exercise with um, listing all the things that they can't do and you can do, and you know, it's kind of funny because you get that aha moment of saying, okay, you know, the first person you need to lead and inspire is yourself. And part of that is putting yourself out there and saying and asking questions, stepping up when you can and saying, "Hey, I can do that." Part of it is also understanding there may be times that you may feel you're stepping on somebody's toes, and the truth of the matter is you're not stepping on somebody's toes. You're providing a solution. You're providing leadership in the absence of leadership. And so many times in this world, we have an absence of leadership. You and I both know because we have HR backgrounds and stuff, how people historically have become managers, supervisors, leaders, and how ill-equipped they seem to
Mhm.
be. Do you want to dive into that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, we definitely can. Um, I think one thing we saw often is that we can be great individual contributors, and then we get promoted to leadership positions and to lead others. Um, and it's great. We have the foundation, right? We know the job, we know what we're doing, but we're not necessarily given the skills and the training to understand how to take those skills we already have into leading others, because it's a different skill set altogether, right? It's a different responsibility. And what kind of saddens me is that sometimes people step into those roles without what they need, the support they need, the training they need, um, and they feel like they're bad at it, and they feel like they've failed, and pretty quickly they want to move away from a, you know, lead role, and they want to go back to an individual contributor role. And I even see
Yeah.
that in people that own their business. They are ready to grow their business and scale their business, but they're so afraid to hire because they think they're not good leaders, that they stay smaller than they need to be. So, so yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah. No, that's everyone thinks that there's this big difference between people who work in corporate or who own their own business. And the thing is, I talk a lot about transferable skills in the work that I do. And the truth of the matter is the skills that you learned in corporate, if you've worked in a corporate setting, those are transferable skills to, your own thing. And there are things that I leverage from my experience every day. Um, I think one of the biggest issues when it comes to, when it comes to individuals who are looking to grow and looking to scale and to do those things, I think there is that genuine fear of failure or not doing it right or needing it to be perfect
Hmm.
because there's a feeling that the stakes are so high. And I think that's really interesting because the things that they're fearful of, a lot of times may be the things that actually sink their boat.
Yeah,
So,
it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the reality is that leading other people is probably the hardest thing that you'll ever do. It's hard to lead yourself as it is, right? And so
mhm,
I think we need to take away that expectation that things are going to be perfect, or that leaders are naturally born, or that you either have it or you don't, right? This like specific charisma that it's required to be a great leader. And really remember that it's a process, right? It's a journey. And as long as you're engaged and you really want to do the best for yourself and your team, um, you're doing the right thing, right? And you're going to get better with time. You can get feedback, you can get support. If your organization is not giving you the support you need, you can get an external coach to help you. So there are many ways to kind of skin the cat so that you can get what you need as far as being a
yeah.
leader.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, You know, I had worked for some very progressive companies when it came to training and development, and that was fantastic. And for them, building internal leadership capacity was something that was ingrained in our culture. And what was interesting is the company I had worked for was acquired by another company. And within 2 years, you start to look at the people who were getting promoted and moving up were the people that were that were acquired
Mhm.
by the new company, and they just were they just had more tools in their toolbox when it came to leadership and self leadership and how they showed up in the business that they couldn't deny it. And the truth is, a lot of times, a lot of organizations don't put that value on training and development. And unfortunately, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to seek it. And they're going to need to use coaches like you or like me to fill that gap to kind of get them to that next level. And it's unfortunate that, a company doesn't do this because really it's a lot for their benefit,
Mhm.
but it's also for your benefit. And I think a lot of times what happens when the corporate decision making that kind of goes on is the fear of, oh, let's if we train them, they're going to go someplace else and they're going to make more money. And that you and I both know is the wrong thinking,
Mhm.
because if you don't train them and they stay, that's probably worse,
Mhm.
um, because at some point they're going to leave anyway. So, I think there's a lot of things that kind of play into that. Um, you know, what else do you think is some of the things that you have seen in your work that people tend to struggle with when it comes to self leadership?
Yeah. Um, I think definitely leadership presence is something that they struggle with. From starting to, with, like I mentioned before, seeing themselves as a leader, understanding the impact they have as a leader, understanding that your team will do things they see you do versus what you tell them to do. Um,
Mhm.
and I think we both seen that one of the biggest liability a company can have is a bad leader and bad leadership, because
Yeah.
I think we've all left jobs because of the bad, maybe bad bosses, toxic leadership uh, situations. And so, um, investing early on and consistently on your leadership development, it's really something that's worth its weight on gold, right?
Yeah. No, from a leadership presence, I think that's a term that maybe a lot of people may not may not understand, or they just it's a new kind of term for them. And I know you and I talk about leadership presence. It you know, it's it's more than just looking and feeling and showing up as a leader. It goes a little bit deeper than that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think you'll see it described in different ways. I think some people describe it as you said, just the way quote unquote you look and the way you kind of walk the walk. Um, but I also feel like it's a lot deeper than that. I think it's how you use your energy, right, and how you manage your energy, how you manage your time, your habits, how effective and efficient you are, um, and how inspirational you are to other people. Um, that true sense of the word leading and inspiring others, right? That we talk about. And these are all skills you can grow over time. I want to just emphasize again that it's not you're either born with it or you're not. That is something that people associate with charisma that sometimes gets confused with leadership, but it's not a requirement to be a good leader. You can be a good leader and be extroverted or introverted or any way, shape, or form you come in.
I'm gonna tell you, I agree with that so
Mhm.
wholeheartedly because honestly, I've seen it where I've had people that have been very cocky and very self-assured and everything, and they were just not good leaders. They just were not, when it came to their staff, they were the problem children.
Mhm.
Um, but then, I mean, I much rather have there was an individual that I had worked with, he had become a supervisor and kind of went from an individual contributor to supervisor, kind of like we talked earlier. And honestly, when I was his HR person, I came back from being an HR manager. I became, for this whole division, I became the HR person for them and basically supported one VP that was basically the whole United States, with the one exception. And this guy got promoted, and honestly, he was in my office or stopping me in the hallway asking me questions constantly. And he was asking questions on how he could be a better leader, how he was having some difficulties engaging with one of his employees, how he could do that better. I'm going to tell you, I'll take that person any day than the person who is I got this, I know this and everything. And it's amazing what you had said, you know, the skills that he was developing was skills that, again, things that he's been learning or things he was starting to learn and pick up and do those things. And it wasn't something he was born with. Again, he was not the most charismatic person, but he was a very kind, a very conscientious leader,
Mhm.
and he really cared about his people.
Yeah. I would say a friend of ours, and I won't say her name, but a friend of ours and I joke that sometimes there's an inverse correlation between confidence and performance. And I guess what I mean by that, as it pertains to leadership, is that if you're out there feeling like you're the best leader in the world and that you got this, I would encourage you to work on self awareness, get feedback. And I say that because there's always more to learn, right? I've been
Mhm.
studying leadership since I was in undergrad, and that's over 20 years. And I have so much more to learn still to this day. And for those of you who feel less confident about your leadership skills, I would also encourage you to look around, maybe see how far you've come, and really get some specific goals maybe together on what you want to work on, but not be so hard on yourself because you're probably a better leader than you think you are.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. And kind of I popped it up earlier and stuff. I'll pop it up again on the bottom here, um, about change, right? Change is the only thing that's constant. And you brought up a great point about lifelong learning and stuff. Again, the things that we learned in graduate school, the things that we learned on the job and stuff, they've changed, they've morphed, they've done different things. And the way we did things 10 years ago are different than how we do them today.
Yes.
And I guess the best landscape to look at that is so much has changed since COVID that how we deal with leadership in a post-COVID world is different than we did before COVID. Again, a lot of companies are either 100% remote or a hybrid where they're part-time in the office, part-time remote. And I think it was somewhere along the lines of like, um, somewhere around 40% of the workforce now is either 100% remote or work a hybrid schedule.
Mhm.
Where before, um, you know, beforehand, you're talking about single digits. I don't think it even broke 10% if it did of the workforce that worked remotely or a hybrid schedule. And that again, for leadership, that has a whole host of implications in how you lead people and how you lead teams. But the funny thing is, the people you work with may be the best equipped to make that transition. And the reason why I say this is they're used to working with or having people do projects for them and outsourcing certain things where they're dealing with people that may be in other locations. They're not sitting right with them. So, I mean, how have you found some of that?
Yeah, definitely. That's actually one of the things I was thinking when I was talking about experience in leadership. Um, the the working from home, right, wave has definitely changed how people lead or need to lead. Um, and and you're right. I mean, I think entrepreneurs are definitely well versed on people working remotely, right? Because even when we start as solopreneurs, we have people do small projects, right? Like even if you hire somebody in Fiverr or something like that, people are working remotely, or you have a virtual assistant or something. Even from the beginning, you kind of start working with people from remote locations. Um, and either you have good experiences, or if you have bad ones, you start kind of building that um, idea that we talked about earlier on, that maybe things don't work out or you're not a good leader, right? And that kind of
Mhm.
sours maybe your um, openness to hire a team later on when you need to. Um, and so I think it's important to start developing that awareness on your leadership skills and those skills altogether. Um, and one of the things that I kind of go back to time and time again with clients is the ability to have what I will call maybe difficult conversations, right? I know we've spoken personally about this at length, but they don't have to be termination conversations. They could just be any conversation where you as a leader feel uncomfortable having, right? And
Yeah.
God knows we've had lots of those in our career. And that becomes even more important, I think, when you're working virtually, because you don't get the day-to-day rapport building that you would get in an office. uh, you
Yeah.
don't give people so much the benefit of the doubt that you would give if you knew them personally. And so things can really snowball quickly if you don't have those conversations early on around expectations, if things are not going the way they should be going, etc. So I think it's a really important skill, and it's something I coach on specifically around having quote unquote difficult conversations with people in your team.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And you know, I use a program called Go Brunch.
Mhm.
I'm not trying to publicize them, but one of the things that they have is something that they have like for co-working or for remote working, where you can set up a room and you can set up multiple rooms where people can go and they actually can have touch points where they can go and log in and they can be in a specific room, and you as a leader can pop in and, hey, anyone have questions or anything like that? And then you can have an immediate video conference there, almost like you would like knock on somebody's door
Yeah.
and pop in to say, hey, what's going on? So there's a lot of different tools and a lot of different things out there that could help with those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a brave new world when it comes to that.
I think that brings up, I think, a really good point around visibility and as a leader. Um, I think as a leader, sometimes we spend a lot of time maybe talking to our management. We think where we're going is very clear, right? Maybe we told our team once, we think everybody's on the same page, but I think it's really important to repeat ourselves to the point where we think
Mhm.
um, we're just boring, like we're saying the same thing over and over, maybe in different ways. um, People in our team learn differently, right? Some people like to see things in writing. Some people like to see things in teams, one on one. So it's very important to have a clear direction and have that direction be known by everybody in the team. And I think that becomes even more important when you're working remotely.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I did when I worked corporate, and again, this was in a time where it was, everything was face to face. You were in the
Mhm.
office kind of thing. Is in the morning, I'd have a morning huddle, and it would be the first half hour of our
Yeah.
day. And I mean, I had a nice sized team. I didn't have a small
Mhm.
team. I would sit in my office and we'd specifically talk about, hey, what's going on in your world? What's going on in and thing? What are your priorities for the day? And everyone knew that they had to talk about what their priorities were. And it was good for me because then I had an understanding about what was going on in their world and how I might be able to put more responsibility on or needed to take things away. If there were difficulties, it was a good way to get help and assistance that
Mhm.
way. And again, it's one of those things where it's, you know, in this time where we're working more virtually, you're going to have to become creative doing that stuff and having that self leadership, having that leadership presence, and all those things is really, really important.
Yeah. When I was in corporate, I was a fan of having a team meeting weekly so that everybody could see where projects were and how their work fit in with the bigger picture. And I was also a fan of having one-on-one meetings. There, whether they were weekly or biweekly, depending on the person position. But I think having that set time to give people support, coaching, feedback, to get feedback from them on what's working and what they need from me was really actually very important and very helpful.
No, Gene, you're absolutely right. Um, Now we're kind of coming towards the end. We're actually running a little bit
Mhm.
over. These discussions are so great and everything. You want to tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're working on now and some of the things that, you know, some of the things that you have upcoming, and tell the world, because we do have a few people out there that are actually watching.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. So, like I said, I have some customized coaching that I provide. So, the way to work with me on that would be basically to have a call and we do kind of an assessment on the phone. And from there, I proposed a way to move forward. That's one of the ways I like working because I like kind of customizing things to where people are in their journey. And that's whether you're in
Mhm.
corporate or whether you have your own business. And I'm putting together a group class. More to come on that right now. But you can follow what I'm doing at jeanali.com or on socials as Jean Ali.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me put that up there again.
And
So
I will have um, a free gift opt-in for your audience that I will give you the link to so that you can put it in the comments later on.
fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. Actually take this and actually use it as a podcast as
Mhm.
well, and put that out there so it'll get publicized in other ways as well.
Okay.
Um, Again, you can see on the bottom, geneali.com or Ask Gene. The other thing is, if you want, you can scan the code up here.
Oh, sorry. It's
Um,
Ask Gina Lee at Ask Gina
at,
Lee. Yeah.
okay. So, yeah, check Gina out on her socials. She did a very, very good live stream on Instagram yesterday. Very proud of her showing up that way. And again, her website is up here. Now, let's get into some other things. Jean, thank you again for coming today. I really appreciate it and everything. Um, I'm going to keep you on here while I go through some housekeeping stuff before we wrap up. Again, Gene and I work very similarly in the sense that we work with people one on one. I do have some courses and stuff like that that you can actually sign up for and actually take. If you want to find out a little bit more about what I'm doing, what you can do is you can actually book a free informational. Uh, I know the QRC code is a little bit weird and stuff, but honestly, it works really well. If you scan that code there, it'll take you directly to my calendar where you can book time. I keep my calendar up to date. I love talking with people about kind of with what they're doing and kind of where I can fit in and help them get to that next level. The other thing is I do have an online offering and stuff where you can go. I call it the Hiring Season Essentials. It focuses on resume strategy and interviewing. Uh, it's regularly an 1197 value. I'm selling it for under $500. It's chock full of information. There's some additional bonus information, and I'm actually getting ready to relaunch this for the fall. And during that time, I will have some live calls that you can actually join in, and you can actually ask your questions on somebody who's been doing this for quite a while and has seen a lot of things. I used to say I've seen everything. What I quickly have learned is as much as I've seen a lot, um, people always seem to surprise me. So, again, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Like I said, we did have two people that actually joined today. George, thank you very much. Connie, thank you very much for joining us today. And we will see you next week. And have a wonderful week, a very productive week. And take care.